Some sad news for Meghan Markle's fans today, and for Meghan Markle herself. Um, Her Archetypes podcast has been axed by Spotify. Um, so they've announced that the Archetypes won't be renewed for a second season as the audio company begins to make changes and revamp its output, has been confirmed. The streaming giant and the Sussex's audio production company Archwell Audio released a joint statement Thursday night saying they've mutually agreed to part ways and are proud of the series we made together. Or in other words, Spotify has decided to pull the plug, let them go, but then they do this whole mutual agreed to part ways thingy, so they can save face. Meghan and Harry. They'd signed buddy a 20 million deal with Spotify. This was in late 2020, but insiders close to the audio giant claimed the royal couple didn't meet the productivity benchmark required to receive the full payout. And this is what the Wall Street Journal have reported. And this is the thing. Is this a huge surprise? Not really. From what I'd heard, I've never checked out the podcast, but the podcast wasn't getting good numbers from what I'd heard. There was like a YouTube channel on it where you have some clips, and they weren't getting good numbers. I think they barely had about 1,000 subscribers. So Christ, my channel has more subscribers than Meghan and Harry's buddy podcast on YouTube. It's probably more so really Meghan. I say Meghan Harry. It's really just Meghan's podcast. But then I think like the first guest that Meghan had on her podcast was Mariah Carey, and she's fun enough somebody who is biracial, but you'd think like Meghan by looking at her that she isn't. She's Caucasian. But there was something that always stood out to me. I remember someone saying that how they'd figured this out. I would never have took the time to figure this to look and check and see, but Meghan Markle on that podcast with Mariah, she actually spoke more on it than Mariah did. And that is some kind of strange for like doing these things, because when it's like you're doing a podcast, it's like, well, you're the interviewer, right? You're asking the questions. So usually you should just kind of ask the question, kind of keep quiet, let the person answer. But I think Meghan was always, before Mariah could even elaborate, she was already jumping in with an anecdote or trying to, yeah, as I say, compare herself to Mariah, so I guess she's comparing herself to Mariah, like the talent that Mariah has, comparing herself, it was the Serena Williams, with the talent, buddy Serena Williams has, because you can't compare yourself to like Serena Williams when it comes to like the ambition and the hardships that she's had to go through in her life. It's just, you can't do that. And I know that it was a psychologist, Richard Grannon, he had been talking about this, and it was in the podcast that he did with, it was the guy Andy Gold. And he said, quote, she entered foreign territory, literally and figuratively, gouged something from that territory, took it away to another place, and is now feeding on it. And yeah, that's exactly what she's done. And it's like, Christ, I know people like that. I know people who could, like come into a situation, they don't really have much, get something from it, and then that's it. They've stolen the value. That's happened over time when it comes to hundreds of years back, countries invading other countries, whatever. But Meghan though she's so slick with it though, because one, it's not like straight up. It's not like she's transparent about it, right? It's not like she's like, I'm getting what I can for myself. I don't care who gets hurt along the way. She does, Meghan does the whole nicey nice. Oh, hey, I love everybody, love the world. I want to be friends with everybody. All that bullshit. But Meghan wants to play the victim. She wants to play the race card. But it's got nothing to do with race. It's got nothing to do with that. I think ultimately the royal family, don't get me wrong, I'm not really a huge royal family fan. I'm not really like big like pro-monarchy. Royal family ultimately didn't like her because, she's just ultimately not a likable person. It's like got nothing to do with race. I think I didn't even know until 2018 time. I think it was around 2016 when I'd heard of the name. But I didn't know until around 2018 that she was biracial. So it has never been about race. It's never been about race with Meghan Markle as to why people don't like her. So that's one thing. She needs to drop that. She needs to stop playing the race card, her and Harry playing the race card on her behalf. But Meghan was always going to want to do things on her own terms. Always. Going to visit a primary school in Sheffield, that was always going to be seen as beneath her. She wants to be living out in LA, out there, out in Melrose, shopping there, or her and Harry going to those fancy exclusive, members only clubs. That's the life she wants. She was always going to view, gloomy Britain. She'd see that as beneath her, and she was going to do things on her own terms. Because being in the royal family, it wasn't going to be on her terms, but it has to be on her. Just like what Harry said, right, just before the wedding. It was like their wedding. What Meghan wants, Meghan gets. The world revolves around Meghan Markle. Everybody else just happens to be a part of it. That's how it works. I mean, look at her now. She has no relationship with her father. No relationship with her half-sister. And I think when you look into that, you can back up that, Meghan has lied. She's claimed that she hadn't seen her. I think Meghan tried to claim that she hadn't seen her in about 20 years, but then I think around 2008, 2009 or so when she was there at her half-sister's graduation. Very dismissive of her half-sister. Very rude and disrespectful. The way she talks about how I don't know your middle name and shit like that. It's just like, wow. It's like how she gets away with it, and how she has all these followers after she just is so dismissive of her family, half sister, her dad, is a half brother as well. I mean, just really, really, you couldn't get any more disrespectful than that. Like, you really couldn't. But she's played her game well though to get what she got. She's got where she's at now. She has played the game pretty fucking well, right? You've got to give her credit, right? At one point, she could have just ended up being a supporting cast member made in Chelsea. There was even something there that she could have started dating Ashley Cole. So that her life could have gone in a totally different direction at that point if she'd gone down one of those roads. But like some people say that she in the end she'll dump Harry, but I don't think so. I think they very much deserve one another, and they will be together. I think for the foreseeable future, and I'm pretty good with my predictions. I said Kim and Kanye would be done within 5 years. They split up within 6.5, going on 7 years. I predicted that with Andrew Tate, all the stuff with him was going to be exposed soon, about 4 months before it happened. So, I'm pretty good with predictions, But, so yeah, they've pulled the plug on our podcast, and that was the thing. It's just indifference now. Nobody really cares about Meghan and Harry. No one was checking for their stupid, silly little podcast where she had people I think it was the comedian Trevor Noah, and he makes these silly ass jokes about saying how, the France team is really just more or less an African team, and because there's so many, black people in the French team, and that was the thing is you make these kind of silly jokes, and it's like someone said, it's like you're denying their Frenchness, the guys that are proud to be on the French team, because they're not white. But it's these kind of silly people that they would have on their podcast that they know they're always going to agree with everything they say. They've got their heads so far up their backside, would never challenge them on anything. So people like them, whoever else was on their podcast, oh yeah, they'd love people like that. They would never have somebody on and engage or talk to somebody that would actually challenge them on their bullshit though. Never. But this is it, yeah. So it's all over now for Meghan and Harry with their podcast. That is, I mean, they're still supposed to get 100 million for the bloody Netflix special, but hey ho, they're not going to get all the 20 million. They might still get about 10 million, but this just sums up. It just lets you know though that no one really cares now. No one really cares.